Welcome to AlgoStreak, where we simplify DSA one problem at a time. In this series, we'll be solving the Striver SDE sheet step by step with clear explanations and beginner-friendly code. Let's begin today's problem. So the first problem is set matrix 0. Here, we'll be given with a m cross n matrix which contains zeros and ones. And if an element is 0, we'll set all the elements in that particular row and that particular column to be 0 as shown in the solution. Now we can do this in various different ways, but the most optimized and simplest way is using to mark the first row and the first column to be 0. What I'm trying to say is, for this particular matrix, we'll run a loop. So the loop runs in this row, the second row, and when it encounters this element 0, it will change the first element of that particular row and that first element of that particular column to be 0. Okay? So when I'll run this loop again, and if let's run this loop from I equals to 0 to 1, 2, 3 to 2 and j equals to 0 to 2 as well. I is the row, j is the column. So at matrix 0, 1, the loop will encounter a 0. Now we can change the entire column to be 0 and this entire, and in the similar way, when at I is 1, 0, the loop encounters 0, we can change the entire row to be 0. So the resultant matrix will look like this. Now this will be more clear when I show you the code. For now, let's see a problem that can arise with this kind of solution. The problem is when the first element of, rather any element in the first row or the first column is 0, it will be difficult to identify by the matrix whether it's an element which originally belonged to the matrix or it is a marker. For better explanation, if we use the same technique for this particular matrix, first let me clear this area. Yes. So now if we use the same technique for this, then the first row is already marked as 0 when this element is encountered, and the first column is also marked as 0 for both of these elements because they belong to the same row, and this is the first column and this is also the first row element of this particular column. So now when we turn this matrix into the set 0 matrix, the loop encounters a 0 first and will turn these elements as 0. And again, these elements will also be turned as 0. Now in the second round, when the loop encounters this 0, this element will also turn as 0. So if the loop encounters a 0 at this point, it will turn these elements to 0 as well. But we don't want this. So what can we do? The most simple solution is, in a variable, we'll store if any of the elements in the first row or the first column is 0 or not. And then we'll manipulate this part of the matrix using the same technique as discussed before. And after that, if any of the elements in the first column and first row was 0 according to the original matrix, we'll change the first row and first column to be 0. Okay, so now let's dive into the code. We can see the code here. I have already written the main function for saving time. Now you can also use user input, but I'll use a simple predefined input format. Let's start. First, we'll initialize the first row and first column variables, which will indicate whether any element in the first row or the first column is 0 or not. We can set it as Boolean, as it's just a mere indication. First row is equal to false. Yes. So now we have to run a loop to know whether the elements are actually 0 in the first row or first column. So we'll run the loop for all the elements in the first row, and if any element in the first row is 0, we'll set the value of first row to be true. We don't need to check for any other element as we have already got one element, so we'll just use a break. The same method will be followed for all the element in the first column, and if we find any element in the first column to be 0, we'll just set the first column variable as true, and then we'll break from the loop. We'll break from the loop now. Okay. So now we'll manipulate the rest of the matrix and set the markers. We'll run the loop from 1 to the length of the matrix, as the first column and the first row is already taken care of. So now, as discussed, if the element is 0, Then we'll set the first element of that particular row to be 0 and first element of that particular column to be 0 as well. So if matrix ij is equal to 0, the element at I0 is set to 0 and the element at 0j, that is the first column, the element of that column is set to 0 as well. Now marking is done. We'll now change the matrix in place as the problem wants. So we'll run the loop and first change the rest of the matrix before changing the first row and first column. If I0, that is the first element of that particular row is 0, we'll change the entire row to 0. We'll change all the elements in that row, that is starting from 1 to the last element, to 0. Now we'll run similar kind of loop for changing all the elements in a particular column to be 0. So for that, we'll run the loop for each column. We'll run for each column in this loop, in this matrix, and then we'll set each row, each element in that column to be 0 if the first element of that column is 0. So for this, I've missed a step. We have to check if matrix 0 comma j equal to 0 or not. If it is 0, we'll change every element in that particular column to be 0. Now the main logic is done. We'll come back to our problem that we have got with the first column and first row variables. We'll check if the first row is true or not. That means if any element in the first row is 0. If any element is 0, we'll run a loop and then change all the elements in that row to be 0. Here we have to look at one thing carefully. We are running the loop from j equal to 0. As we know that the first element is not marked as 0, so we have to change the first element of that particular row as well. Similarly, trying for first column, same logic, I should start from 0 as the first element in that column may or may not be 0. Yes. And we'll change all the elements in that column to be 0. Okay, so now we'll run and see our code if it's working or not. Coming to terminal, compilation is done. So when we run it, okay, so the desired answer is received. Thank you for watching my video, and please like and subscribe to my channel if you want more such contents. Thank you everyone.